Has it hit you guys yet that JJK is about to end? It still doesn't feel real to me. Like, how do we only have one chapter left? What's happening? What's happening in the story? It's just, I don't know. A lot of questions, a lot of theories. So today we're going to dive into more of those. Spoilers if you're not caught up. All right, y'all. So to kick us off today, we've got this from Eric, who just wants to know what are my top 3 scenarios for a continuation of JJK? Like, assuming we got something else from Gege, what would I want? Prequel, sequel, spinoff, whatever, right? So in the hypothetical that we did get this, I think a sequel would be cool, assuming there was some foundation laid for that in this final chapter. Like if there was some big twist, whether kenjaku was still around or the merger got started somehow. Like I think that would obviously be very interesting to continue on in a direct sequel. However, if there isn't anything like that, then I think instead of a sequel, I would prefer a prequel. Like get to explore the Heian era, and just get to see what Jujutsu Society was like back then. See kind of Sukuna come to the top of his prominence, right? I think that would be really cool. And then I also think a sort of spin-off about Toji's younger years would be a really cool exploration into the world as well. So I would say probably those 3 in that order. So sequel, assuming there's a foundation for it, then prequel, then spinoff. Next up, we got this one from Crimson, who is one of my YouTube members and also one of my moderators, so shout out to you as always, Crimson. But he says, maybe Nobara is too much of a stretch, but what if Gege made a late reveal in his idol manga where Takada-chan would show up, basically revealing that it was a connected world with Jujutsu Kaisen? And that would be hilarious, in my opinion, and I would love that. I am totally a sucker for connected universes from singular authors, or doesn't have to be a singular author, but just connected IPs. Now, I'm not talking about Marvel. That's obviously a huge and prominent example, especially the Infinity Saga was incredible. But Stephen King's Dark Tower, like basically all of Stephen King's novels are secretly, or maybe not so secretly, connected. I love stuff like that. So if Gege did write an entire idol manga that had nothing to do with curses and sorcery, but just one day we see like Takada and Todo show up in the background, I would eat that up. I think that would be fantastic. Next up, we got a few thoughts from Sam here, starting with the fact that they think Gojo's absence makes sense on a meta level. It was his dream to change the Jujutsu world, so the last chapter will discuss how it's finally realized, probably something like the trio visiting his grave. And if you haven't seen my video about chapter 270, I talk basically about that. I think that is my best guess right now as to what 270 was about, and specifically the title of 270, A Dream's End, was about Gojo's dream being realized. He was able to successfully push Jujutsu Society in the right direction by having good and better people in the positions of power and also nurturing the younger generation to just continue to push it that way. So whether or not he is dead, whether or not he does have some sort of comeback in whatever form, whatever fashion next chapter, I think regardless, that's true. And, he was successful in that regard. And then next, what do you think about Uruume's statement that they only won because Sukuna was reincarnated? I touched on this a little bit in a questions video sometime recently. I don't remember when it was, though. But so to just reshare my thoughts, I do think there's something to that. I do think that he was weaker because he was an incarnated sorcerer. However, that you bring up a good point about, well, if he didn't have 10 shadows, then maybe he wouldn't have even gotten past Gojo. And I think that's fair. So what I'll say is, you guys have heard me talk about this, I think Sukuna minus 10 shadows and Gojo is a coin flip. I think either one of them are capable of winning. So in the hypothetical that Sukuna does beat Gojo still and then has to go through the gauntlet of Jujutsu High like we saw in this scenario, I do think he's stronger if he's in his true body, because Yuji's soul punches, while they still do damage, they don't have the added benefit of stripping him away from Megami, which is making him far weaker, have far less output and all that stuff, right? So I think that's what Uruume was speaking to, basically saying that like if you didn't have this extra benefit of those soul punches being that much more effective against him, y'all would have had no chance. And I think there's some truth to that. Next up, we got this from Pateno, who says, I do find it odd how the story doesn't bring up anything about Gojo's death to really resolve things. And as you guys know, that's something I've been chirping about as well, which is why I think we will get a development on that in one way or the other in the final chapter. But they say, so what if he's actually alive, not by being alive, but by, seeing that his dream has come to fruition? And I agree with that. I do think that that doesn't satisfy the fact that he hasn't been acknowledged, But I do think it could very well be the case that he is truly dead, and we will just get an acknowledgement of that in the final chapter, perhaps with an emphasis on how he was successful, how his dream was realized, which again, I believe chapter 270 was showing us. So yeah, we're just gonna have to see like what final pin Gege might put in this whole Gojo situation. Next up, we got this from Shark that doesn't include a question or anything, just some very kind words. And my guy, it is my absolute honor to accompany you on those long road trips. I've said it once, you guys are probably tired of me saying it, but I truly am just humbled by the fact that I get to be on y'all's different journeys with us enjoying JJK together. So I'm truly appreciative. Thank you so much for the kind words, man. Next up, we got this one from Manga, who says, I think the scar on Kenjaku is the result of him performing a binding vow to not perform the brain surgery for the first time he swapped. But if so, then why did Yuta get the scar on his head? Maybe the binding vow is that the scar will always come. So we do have some insight into this. We know that from the fan book, Gege mentions that the scar on Kenjaku's head is due to a binding vow, because that is something he could heal with RCT. But that's all we know. So we still don't know if actual brain surgery is involved or not. Yes, there are some things that point to that being likely, but we don't know for sure. I would have imagined before the Yuta Gojo situation that the scar was related to him keeping the curse techniques of the previous hosts. But the fact that Yuta has the scar seems to make that not the case. So we still don't know exactly what is going on there. But Yuta's scar may eventually heal if whatever the binding vow is, he just hasn't done. Which, again, we just don't have enough information to pin this down exactly yet. And with one chapter left, I don't know that we will. So it might remain just an interesting mystery. Next up, we got a couple from Michael here, starting with, what do you think about the parallels between Yuta and Ghetto? And they mention how both of them are able to add other techniques into their arsenal via copy and via cursed spirit manipulation. And yeah, I certainly think there are some parallels there. And I've also talked about some parallels between Ghetto and Yuji in the way they both have to consume evil objects in order to, as part of their journey, right? So I just definitely think there are intentional parallels between the older generation and the next generation. And I think Ghetto is a perfect example of what happens when you don't have your friends and your allies around you, right? Ghetto went down a dark path. Gojo didn't notice when his friend needed him most. And yet Yuta does have that support group around him. Yuji does have that support group around him because of Gojo, right? He learned from his mistake and was able to correct that in the next generation. So I think all of that's very poetic and beautiful. And then the next one here is, why do people think that Yuta can copy cursed spirit techniques? If that were the case, there would be no difference between him and Ghetto, and he would have way more curse techniques due to the amount of curses that Rika consumed after killing Kenjaku. And that's a fantastic point that I have not thought about before, because I have wondered, could Yuta copy a cursed spirits technique? I do think we don't know definitively for sure, because Rika maybe had just killed those curses without consuming them, which we know is the requirement. Also, there could be some weird nuance in the state of their existence having already been consumed by Ghetto. But we're just jumping through a bunch of what ifs here. But again, like I mentioned, something I hadn't really thought about before, and at the very least, you would have to have think Rika has eaten some cursed spirits, and we haven't seen Yuta use any curse techniques that we can't specifically identify. So he maybe is not able to copy them in the same way. Next up, we got this from Until Time Begins, who starts out with some kind words and just thank you so much. It's still very bizarre to me to even think that I could be anyone's favorite YouTuber, but I am extremely humbled and honored, so thank you, man. But he wants to know, how would I rank these techniques in terms of difficulty and also coolness? So shrinking your domain, opening a barrierless domain, and opening it for 0.2 seconds. And I think I have to say that the barrierless is the most difficult because of the way the narrator described it as a divine technique. We've only seen Sukuna and Kenjaku do it, two of the best sorcerers in the series. So I gotta go that number one, shrinking the domain number two, and pretty much just a little bit beneath barrierless. I think both of those are incredible feats. We know was only possible thanks to Gojo's time in the prison realm, which is not an experience that a lot of people are gonna have, right? So I think that also took genius and a very unique set of circumstances that would be insanely difficult for anyone else to pull off. Yuta was able to do it, but because he was in Gojo's body, right? And then opening your domain for 0.2 seconds would be third. Then in terms of coolness, I think it's pretty much the same order. Barrierless is the most cool, shrinking right below it. 0.2 third, way further down in my opinion. Next up, we got this from Alexicon, who also dropped some kind words. Thank you, King. But he wants to know, who do I relate to most in JJK? And honestly, there's two answers. Kusakabe, who you said, and Nanami. You know, that's definitely my unk status. I definitely relate to both of them because they both are just kind of tired of things. They don't want to work the 9 to 5. Kusakabe is never trying to get into too much danger, and that would definitely be me in that world. Like, sure, I'd love to be strong, but like, I'm not trying to go out there and get killed. You know what I'm saying? So definitely one of those two, probably leaning a little more toward Kusakabe. Next up, we got this from Skew Hoop, who just says, thanks, fam, and my guy, thank you. Next up, we got this from Yeda Yeda. I just felt it. It possessed me and I had to, but I love the name. He says, hey, manga, I got a fun little theory and it's about Yuji's domain. What if his domain is like the Truman Show so that everything after his domain shattering isn't actually real and it's just all in Yuji's subconscious of his idea of a happy ending? And I've seen a lot of people talk about this type of potential ending, and I'm just going to call it the infinite Tsukiyomi just to encapsulate all of those types of dream endings. And I certainly think that would be an incredible twist if that's what we got, but that would lead me to believe that we're getting a part 2 if that were the case. And again, as of right now, I don't get the feeling that we're getting a part 2, which means I don't think something like this would be likely. But again, it would be incredible if so. Like, I think that would be a really cool idea. So, and we already know that Yuji's Domain does have some unique capabilities of like creating an entire world essentially that you can explore. So I want to say that like I do think it's possible, but I don't know how plausible it is. Next up, we got this from Mom Calls Me Bub, who says, I just wanted to ask if you've ever read Hunter x Hunter. I know JJK is ending, but if you haven't read it, I would foam at the mouth to hear you dissect it and its intricacies like you do with JJK. And yes, I have, and I'm actually very close to finishing my reread of it to prepare for it coming back. So I will 100% be covering Hunter x Hunter once it comes back. I'm trying to decide if I want to try to make any like recap videos or anything for people that maybe it's been a long time or maybe didn't even read it. I don't know if I'll get time to do that the justice I want, but I might do something like that. So let me know if that would be something you guys are interested in. But yes, 100% we'll be talking about Hunter x Hunter. Next up, we got this from Rashid, who has a suggestion of what the YouTube member icons could be, something I talked about in my previous video. And he said the Jujutsu High button seemed like a good fit, and that is an excellent idea. Somebody else mentioned Maharaga's wheel as well, and I thought that was really cool too. And I think the way I can do it is like the longer you go, like it can evolve. So I love this. I think that would be really cool. And then maybe like the top one could be Maharaga's wheel or something. But let me know if you guys have any other ideas as well. Next up, we got a question from Delmar on the JJK light novels, who wants to know my thoughts on them. Even though they weren't written by Gege, how do I feel about more stories explored in light novel fashion in this universe? And so I actually have not read the light novels, but I have them downloaded and I do plan on checking them out at some point. Because Gege didn't explicitly write them, they haven't been too high on my priority list of things to catch up on because I have a lot of other stuff I need to catch up on. But now, especially with JJK ending, I might get to them sooner than later because even though he didn't write them, he did oversee them. So he still had like some sort of input on them. And hey, more JJK, right? So in that same vein, I would be here for more light novels to explore the world further, assuming Gege had at least some input on it, like whether he oversaw them or what, just to know that he still gave it his blessing. I would be cool with it. So yeah, I'm excited to check them out. If you've read them or if any of y'all have read them, definitely let me know. Definitely let me know your thoughts. English is hard sometimes. Next up, we got a few questions from James, so let's go through these one by one, starting with, what does the pyramid in front of the Ghetto look like in 270? And I'm going to throw this up on the screen so y'all can see it as well. And I actually don't know. Like, I don't have a specific answer. So if we have anybody that's more in tune with Japanese culture, maybe has been to a restaurant like this, that knows exactly what that is, let us know. But my best guess was it's just part of the restaurant setup. Like, it reminds me of those little plastic things you'll see on some tables that, like, list the drink specials or the lunch specials. So I assume it's just something like that, but yeah, y'all let us know for anybody that can specifically identify that thing. But then next says, what rules of the Culling Game have been fulfilled and what could possibly occur to finish those requirements? So there's lots of rules to the Culling Games, but in terms of like the things that needed to happen to start the merger and into the Culling Games, It's essentially just that all the players except for Megami and Kenjaku and Uraume needed to die. So, technically we have Uraume who has passed away. Technically we have Kenjaku who has passed away, to the best of our knowledge, right? So all that would remain would be for Megami to pass away, since he was Sukuna's vessel at the time, right? Other than that, all of the other rules of the Culling Games were just about keeping it going as long as possible, right? And due to the rules that were added by the players, those aren't really a concern anymore, because everybody can avoid the death penalty by just trading their points back and forth. So yeah, the Megami thing is the only final thing, I think. So we know that they're going to take steps to probably save the other incarnated players. I don't know what their plans are beyond that. Maybe they'll think of a contention for if/when Megami dies one day, what that will mean. But I assume it will mean just the Culling Games end at that point, because no one's going to start the merger. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see if this is at all, talked about in the final chapter. But I don't think, again, barring some sort of twist, I don't think the Culling Games are going to be relevant anymore. I think those will just kind of end once they fully take care of everything. And then finally, who is my guess for the mysterious curse user at the end of the chapter? I don't really have a guess, to be honest. Like, I know some people think it's Gojo, some people think it's Mahito. Neither of those theories really resonate with me. So for right now, I would just assume it's like not a character we're already familiar with, and it's like a new character. But clearly that situation is going to tie into something, whether it is something grand like Gojo or Mahito or something like that, we'll see. But as of right now, I don't have any like wild guesses for like who that curse user could be. And then finally here, y'all can pause to read this, but it's just some comments from James on maybe how he sees the direction of the story going with potential sequels in tow. And yeah, I mean, if that were to happen, I would love it, as I'm sure you know that I too have thought that Sukuna may continue to live on in Yuji. But these comments from 270 are interesting in the terms of, we know Tengen was kind of retrieved from Sukuna's remains and is being placed back in the Tomb of the Star Corridor in order to maintain the barriers. So does that at all imply that Sukuna is definitely not in Yuji? I think it could, but it doesn't for certain, because we know that there was a lot of like gloop left around when Yuji punched him out of Megami, right? And then we saw that essence of Sukuna in Yuji's hands. I don't think Tengen would have been within that little essence in the palm of his hand, which implies that Tengen was in some of the other goop elsewhere. So I do think it's possible that Tengen could have been retrieved while also having Sukuna within Yuji, but that definitely at least throws doubt on it. And then finally for this video, we got this from Simple. Y'all pause to read it, but it deals with Kashimo and the Waffle Slash, and specifically if the Waffle Slash was a world cutting slash. And this was a debate that I didn't even know existed until a couple weeks ago when somebody else asked for my opinion on it. So take what I say with a grain of salt. I don't have any skin in this game. I don't think it really matters one way or the other, but I always assumed the Waffle Slash was a world cutting slash, and I'll tell you why. Here is the world cutting slash that Sukuna first uses against Kashimo. Look at the way Gege drew it, and then look at the way Gege drew the Waffle Slash. It's like identical aesthetically, right? So common sense to me says that Gege was showing us that this too was the world cutting slash. Now, to just present the other side of the argument, to be fair, which again, I didn't even know this was a debate, but we see Sukuna do the hand signs and chants for this one. We don't see him do it for this one, so it must just be a normal slash. My pushback to that is that we don't have to see everything that happens within a panel. The implication to me would be that Sukuna did the chants and hand signs for this as well. We just didn't see Gege draw that portion of this encounter. And yeah, it all happens really quick, but I still think it's possible because, again, aesthetically, this looks exactly like the world cutting slash that Gege just showed us. And on top of that, we've never seen Sukuna do anything like this at any other point in the series, which we have seen him use Cleave and Dismantle a ton. Gege never drew it like this. So to me, that means this is a world cutting slash. But again, I don't have any skin in this game. I'm not concerned with the power scaling implications of what this would mean. So if it's not, it's not. But to me, the common sense would indicate that Gege wanted us to assume that this was. Now, why didn't Sukuna ever use this at a different point? I don't know. I feel like this was just the climactic way for this fight to end, and maybe there's not too much more depth to it than that. Could also be that Suguna didn't have the requisite power to do this again, or he didn't want to waste enough power to do this again after this moment because he was still just messing around here. Anyways, y'all, that's all for this one. Thank you so much for the support and all the kind words. I feel truly blessed to be a part of this community, so I just appreciate y'all and thank you for watching.